I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families, and the kids that are going to come around and help you shovel your lawn today or your walk today, and the snowplow drivers that are out there trying to get the streets cleared. The trees are getting snow dropped on them, pretty much everybody and everything, because we are all tied up together in this wonderful planet called Earth. And I have to start with a little confession here. Regular listeners know that I have a tendency to use some big words on this show when we're talking about the environment. And last week I introduced my co-host, Rebecca Wood, as my erstwhile co-host, because for most of my life I thought erstwhile meant like earnest, like, a good, enthusiastic, person. And in fact, I just learned this week that erstwhile means former, as in past tense. And so you might notice Rebecca's absence this week. Don't worry, she is not my erstwhile co-host. Turns out, unfortunately, Rebecca came down with COVID, and she is still getting over it. And that's why we're not live in studio this week. We're doing clean feed. And our hopes and wishes for getting better quick go out to Rebecca. She's going to try to call in a little, just briefly to say hello a little bit later in the show, and hopefully she gets through, and hopefully she's up for it. But that's what I have to apologize to her for calling her my erstwhile co-host on this most excellent show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And it is snowing. It is doing some serious snowing out there today. It looks great. It looks like it's winter supposed to look. And here we are, January 22nd, before that happens. And one thing that there's a tendency for climate deniers to do is every time it snows, every time like this, they get out there and they say, oh, look, global warming's a hoax. And, of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Global warming, in order to think that now, January 22nd, now that we're having some snow, you have to forget about the past 3 weeks when not only did we not have snow, we had 60-degree days and thunderstorms, kind of like it was summer as opposed to winter. But that process where people are convinced by the media, specifically by media like Fox News, that there is no such thing as global warming, that level of brainwashing is not an accident. There are economic entities like oil companies that want this to happen to people. They want as many people as possible to feel or to believe, despite the evidence of their own eyes, that there is no such thing as global warming. Unfortunately, it is working all too well, and it doesn't really matter to them that this has only worked on a minority of people, because poll after poll shows something like 2/3 to 3/4 of us understand global warming, realize it's a problem, and want something done. The problem is that 1/3 to 1/4 are the loudest. They always show up whenever there's something reported on about global warming. And I saw a huge example of that this past week. Oh, but first let me just quickly review what the show's going to be here. So we're going to chat for a little bit here. We're going to chat for another 5 or 7 minutes or so. Then we have an interview. The very nice couple of women from BGSU. They are student members of something called the Environmental Action Group, and which is a student organization. It's kind of typical of like an environmental club. Then there's thousands of those all over the country at different universities and colleges. And we like to interview, the whole spectrum of people that are working on environmental issues here. So I thought it would be nice to just talk to a couple students about their environmental student group. And it is a very nice interview that's coming up after we're done chatting here. Oh, and you can join our conversation at any time in the next hour, 877-900-1007. That's 877-900-1007. Or you can text. Please do text at 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. And we'd be happy to get you on the air. And I'd really appreciate it this week, because without my co-host, that means I've got to fill this whole hour. And that's just much easier if I get some help from you folks. So anyway, after we talk to our friends from the Environmental Action Group, we're going to hear from our wonderful patrons and sponsors. And then we've got ecological news from all around the world, although we're going to start out right here in the Great Lakes with our first ecological news story. So that's our show, and we hope you stick with us for the next hour while we go through it. And so back to this story I wanted to talk about. This past week, they had something called the Davos. You might have heard that term on the news, Davos, which is the name of a city in Switzerland where every year the World Economic Forum has their annual meeting. And all sorts of people get together. There's lots of millionaires and billionaires there, lots of heads of state. And it has been criticized because you've got all these people in limos and Maseratis and Bugattis, and they fly to Davos and talk about global warming. And as we reported last week, turns out billionaires generate something like 3,000 times as much CO2 as the average person does on this planet each year. But they do talk about global warming, and they talk about other problems that are facing the Earth. And there was one panel on there that Al Gore spoke at. And essentially, the head of the panel asked him, what should we tell people about how they can be active to help stop global warming? And so then Al gave this speech, which was very impassioned. It was very strong, but going back to the whole brainwashing thing from Fox News described it as unhinged. They said that Al Gore had a complete meltdown on the stage at Davos, and that is just not true. I wanted to play you the whole thing. Unfortunately, because of copyright laws, the only place I could find it was on Forbes magazine's YouTube channel. So I listened to the whole thing, and I urge you to do it too. He's not unhinged. He stays completely hinged the whole time. Now, he does say some provocative stuff, like he says that he supports Greta Thunberg, who just got arrested in Germany because Germany is trying to reopen a coal mine. And, he says things like at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the largest oil producers in the world, they're going to be heading the COP next year, the Conference on Parties, talking about how do we solve global warming. And he said we shouldn't have an oil company executive be the chair of the global warming conference, the worldwide global warming conference. So he said a lot of obvious things there, and he said them with great passion, but he never came unhinged. And so this is just typical of the way that the conservative news organizations like Fox News are literally brainwashing us, because most, 99% of the people that hear the Fox News report that Al Gore became unhinged are just going to believe it. They're just going to accept it because they believe everything that Fox News tells them, when in fact, it's a lie. He never came unhinged, and I urge everybody to go look at his speech on the Forbes YouTube channel. But this technique of brainwashing, now Fox News reaches something like 1 billion people. So now 1 billion of us out of the 8 billion of us now have this in their head that Al Gore had a meltdown. And one thing, that's a big obvious example of the brainwashing, but they also do more subtle things. Like people who are regular listeners to the show know that we have never stopped calling global warming, even though for a while there it was supposed to be politically correct to call it climate change instead of global warming. We made it a point not to go that way, because overall, even though we do get cold, and even though we do get sometimes more severe cold, like we did back during the Christmas storms because of the polar vortex, we never stop calling it global warming, because overall, that's what's happening. The globe is getting warm. And it turned out, I learned this past week, that this whole idea that we start calling it climate change instead of global warming was actually created by a Republican spin doctor called a fella named Frank Luntz, who just put it into the media that now we're going to start calling it global warming, and lots of media went along with it. That is a very subtle example, but it's an direct example of this sort of brainwashing. Because climate change could be, change could be good or bad. Whereas global warming sounds like the planet is heating up and becoming uninhabitable, which is the truth, which is how it's happening. But there's lots of people working on this full time to convince you to ignore the evidence of your own senses. I mean, we just went through 3 weeks of a January where temperatures were way above normal, where we had thunderstorms instead of snow. And it really struck me that Sean Hannity's take on what Al Gore said at Davos, he said the quote on the headline on his story on Fox News is, "Al Gore is lying to your face," when in reality, Sean Hannity is lying to your face, because he describes what Al Gore is saying as false, and I listened to it, and every single thing he said was absolutely true. And Al Gore, and it was not a meltdown the way Hannity describes it in his show. So I know that that's a little hard lesson for some of you to handle. And a lot of you, those of you who do listen to Fox News and other outlets like that, literally can't accept the evidence of your own senses and see for yourself that the globe is warming, especially when we get a cold day, a normal snowy winter day like this in January. But you're wrong. I mean, I can't be more blunt than that. And Fox News would just describe what I just did as a meltdown, because I'm not tailoring my what I'm saying to anybody. I'm not trying to make it seem softer than it is, because we're in really big trouble, folks. Big trouble. And Al Gore was absolutely correct in pointing it out in the way he pointed it out at Davos. And so there. I needed to get that off my chest, because even though the majority of us, like I said, believe in global warming, understand it's a problem, want it fixed, the powers that be keep using that small minority that don't believe in it they're holding those up as a shield against anything actually happening to help global warming. And so we can't have that keep going. We can't have that situation. And we always turn to the young people to help us with these sorts of problems. And so that's one reason that I wanted to interview the students from the Environmental Action Group here at Bowling Green State University, and to get some hope there, because there's people from the beginning who understand this is a serious problem and we need to deal with it. And so I wanted to hear from the next generation about how they're going to do it, because we're leaving them this tremendous problem. So Josh, let's go ahead and run that interview.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you just share with us your names and who you're with?
My name is Jade Rush, and I'm the president of Environmental Action Group here at Bowling Green State University.
And I'm Maria Volofsky, and I am the communications and media director of Environmental Action Group on campus.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I wanted to talk to you folks because on For a Green Future, we sort of try to interview the whole spectrum of people involved in environmental issues. And student groups like yours on college campuses are certainly a big part of the environmental movement. A lot of things happen because people like you have an organization that does stuff. So I was privileged to speak a little bit at your last meeting on Thursday. And at that meeting, you guys went over a little bit of the history of your organization. Could you kind of repeat that for our listeners?
Yeah, so Environmental Action Group, also known as EAG, was founded in 1977. So we are quite old on campus. I think we're one of the oldest orgs, I want to say, that's still going and still has participating members and volunteers and all of that good stuff. We've done quite a lot of things over the years, and we're really just kind of working to make a sustainable change on campus, whether that be through different initiatives that we've created on our own, or with the help and support of other offices and members on campus.
I see.
So-
Could you, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to explain some of the projects. Like we have a clean energy fund that was made in 2015. We banned plastic bags and we rebanned plastic bags after COVID. And we also just have a lot of other different things that we're working on this year.
Oh, okay. So that's plastic bags on campus.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. So what are some of the things you're looking at to do this year? What are some of your things looking forward?
So we've been working on trying to get part of the old golf course on campus turned into a green space, a recreational area where students can go take a walk while it's still being close to campus if they don't have a car, or if they just don't want to go to the other parks or leave campus. So we are currently working on that, and we've been working on that for, I want to say, about 3 years now. And this year we are the closest we've ever been to getting something worked out. Along with the golf course, we've also been looking into the old landfill that's on campus, as that's not really a great space that potentially anybody might want to build on. So also looking at that, and it's a good area and it has a lot of potential to become something better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the old landfill. Is that the big mound that you see on I-75 coming in, or?
That's the golf course. The landfill is by the like commuter lot and the big like student parking lot. It's kind of across from the cemetery.
Oh,
The best
okay.
way I would describe it. It's like a big hill slant and then like kind of flat on top.
Right. Yeah, just a big empty spot right now. So yeah, that could be improved. So what I'd like to ask, what brought each of you personally into this environmental organization?
So I think Jade and I have a similar take on, we actually found out about EAG in high school, senior year, when we were college searching, we looked up organizations. So we both like knew about it in high school, But when we got here, I went to Campus Fest and I saw the group and I was like, I really want to join. And I was like super enthusiastic about it. And I was like, I want to get involved like as much as I can with this. And this was right when they banned plastic bags on campus. It was the year before we got here. So they had the EAG reusable bags in each residence hall room. So that was another way that I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I have to go see them. And I was like really excited to be a part of this.
Cool. And similar for you, Jade?
Yeah, similar for me. In high school, I found them and I was like, this is a really great organization. I was already passionate about different environmental topics and trying to help the environment as much as I can in high school. I actually started a mixed recycling program at my high school. So I wanted to kind of continue what I was doing at high school at college on a level. So at EAG really kind of aligned with what I wanted to do and actually doing it. So that was really a great draw for me and I've stuck with it ever since. So
Okay. How much does your organization hook up with or cooperate with other student groups in the region or in the country?
I would say we mainly talk to other organizations on campus. We've done some volunteering events with different sororities or different clubs or other organizations that are kind of working towards the same sustainability aspect or wanting to learn how to be more sustainable on campus. On a national level, I would say we haven't really reached out to too many other like student-led organizations.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say to some people are saying that it's basically too late for us to do anything about the future, that things have gotten so bad environmentally, there's no point in trying to fix things or improve things? What do you say to people like that?
I feel like it's not too late in a sense because there are definitely daily changes that like I make on a daily basis that kind of helps the greater cause of everything. And I think as long as we just kind of like get together and like we have a common goal of just wanting to like lower the carbon emissions that we put out every year, if we drive our cars less or if we make sure that the products that we buy are from companies that aren't that are trying to be carbon neutral or companies that do care like about the environment, I think that's one way that you can like on a personal day-to-day like basis, that's something people could do.
And so what do you think about some of the like leading people in the environmental movement, like Greta Thunberg, for example? Is she like an example to you, or do you think she goes too far? What's your opinion on people like that?
I don't think she goes too far. I think she is doing it in a manner that, that is really good and can show how, especially young people, can still make a change and make a difference on the planet. And there's still time, although it's running out, there's still time and you can, make a change. And I think she's showing that in such a great way that others can take her example and lead by that.
Okay. Here's a question that I might get in trouble for, but I've noticed that in student organizations like yours and in a lot of the environmental movement today, the movement is pretty much being led mostly by women. Would you say that's a fair assessment, and how do you feel about that?
That is a tricky question.
Yeah.
I guess as long as we've been in EAG, we've been in it for 4 years, I think there definitely has been more of a women presence in EAG. And I don't know why, like that. I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think on like our level, the men have definitely like stopped coming, and I don't know, and I don't want to assume anything, but I kind of wonder if they're at a point where it's like, okay, it is too late. Maybe I should just stop caring.
Okay.
I
Well,
don't, I'm
yeah,
not
that was a hard question and not really a fair one. But is there anything you'd like to add? Anything we haven't mentioned yet, or anything you'd like to say to our audience?
Take action today for a better tomorrow. That's our little slogan that we have, and as long as I can remember. So I feel like all the little actions that you can do, it'll in the end just make it better.
right. You can always make a change for the better.
That was our interview. And yeah, I have to definitely chime in with our guests there. I always say that whenever you actually do something, you change everything. So thanks so much to the folks over at EAG. And like I say, they're fairly typical of hundreds and hundreds of student organizations all over the country that are working each on their own little school, each in their own university to try to make things better. So we want to encourage that. And we'd also like to encourage you to frequent our advertisers and patrons. Yay! For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to find out what they're doing. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, wcparks.org. And they're also on social media, all sorts of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. And they're having all sorts of fun winter activities. So just because it's finally actually acting like winter doesn't mean the folks at Wood County Parks have slowed down at all. And no, in fact, they're kind of ramping it up over there for January and February. So that's the Wood County Park District. For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Ecofill Shop. The Ecofill Shop is located at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green. They sell lots of different things: cosmetics, bath and body, home and garden, cleaning, towels, knickknacks, candles, fragrances, and a lot of other stuff too. They sell all these things without plastic containers because the whole purpose of the Ecofill Shop is to eliminate plastic. Customers love them, and in fact, we're going to hear a little testimonial from Brittany. And Brittany says, "I love the clean products, designed to keep the environment in mind. They work great, smell amazing, and help stay eco-friendly. Good price for clean, healthy cleaning supplies." So that's just one of the many testimonials you'll see on their website, which is ecofillshop.com. And I have to say, even though I didn't shave this morning because I'm broadcasting, from my house, most mornings I shave using the shaving soap bar that I bought there with a shaving brush, and it works really well, and I just love it. If you're interested, you can give them a call at 419-944-8862 and talk to the owner, Jossie. She's very passionate about environmental issues. Or you can go to their website, ecofillshop.com, or just better yet, just drop in at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green. That's the Ecofill Shop. And For a Green Future, of course, is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who have gone to patreon.com, and there they searched for a Green Future, and up popped our Patreon page, and they signed up to do a little monthly donation that comes out of their checking account at the level that they're able to afford. And that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. And thanks very much to our patrons. So normally this is where Rebecca would be telling us some interesting facts about the natural world, but this week we're going to just have to press on and go straight to the ecological news. So unfortunately, our first story is right here in the Great Lakes, and that is there's a story that PFAS. Okay. Oh wait, Rebecca is here. Hey, let's talk to Rebecca before we go to ecological news. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi there.
How are you feeling?
Sort of moderately cruddy, maybe a little better than yesterday. This is very frustrating, though.
Yeah, you're taking the antivirals.
I am. Yep. Yeah. It seems to be making my spit taste very bad.
Okay, well that's a side effect, but I'm sure it's not too. I'm sure it's worth it though to help get over this thing.
Yeah. It's supposed to make your food taste bad, but to me, my food still kind of tastes a little bland, but basically okay. But yeah, my spit tastes horrible.
How's the sense of smell going?
Doesn't smell. No. I did an experiment where we had some dog poo saved because our baby had a vet appointment. So I held it about 4 inches of under my nose. Really, almost nothing.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, get better, Rebecca. I'm sure I joined with all our listeners in wishing you a speedy recovery there.
I'm extremely inconvenienced and peeved by all this.
I understand, but thanks for pulling it together and calling in. Yes. All right. Thanks,
all right,
Rebecca.
Well, have a good show.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. All right. That was my not erstwhile co-host, my earnest co-host, Rebecca, and we hope she gets better. We got a text while Rebecca was on the line. A listener just texted in to say, I hear, quote, it's too late, unquote, a lot when I quiz young people about the environment. And that is unfortunate because it really is never too late. I mean, the environment, the Earth's ecosystems have come back from really incredibly catastrophic damage in the past. And it will come back from human damage, but it might not come back until after our society collapses. And so what we need to do is, we can't accept that it's too late thing. Like our guest said, it's really not too late. We still have just this tiny little window, which is closing. But if we stop putting carbon in the air, we can still pull this out, folks. So just, if you run into young people that feel that way, just tell them to do something, and they'll feel better. And doing things gives you hope. And so I urge everybody, young and old, to do something to help us get out of this terrible situation. All right, and now back to ecological news. And unfortunately, part of the terrible situation we're in is chemical pollution. And there is a story on the Hill on 117, and it's referencing a story that was published in the Environmental Research Journal, the March 1st edition. The title of the story on the Hill is PFAS in Fish Study Suggests U.S. Freshwater Fish from highly contaminated with forever chemicals. And basically there was a study done from 2013 to 2015. They went out and got 500 fish fillets from fish that were caught in both lakes and streams, and they analyzed them for PFAS. And unfortunately, they discovered that the fish taken from the rivers and the stream had an average of 9,500 nanograms per kilogram of PFAS. That's nanograms per kilogram. That's also what you call 1 in a trillion. And so rivers and streams, they had that level, but lakes, and specifically the Great Lakes, they had 11,800 nanograms per kilogram. And unfortunately, the EPA's quote-unquote safe level of PFAS is 0.02 parts per trillion. So eating one fish exposes you to 100,000 to 1,000,000 times the safe level of PFAS. About 75 of that percent of the PFAS, because there's lots of different kinds of PFAS, or what they call per and polyfluorinated substances, but 75% of what they found was what they call PFOS, which is essentially Scotchgard. If you remember, they used to drench furniture in Scotchgard so that if you spilled stuff on it, it would just sort of roll off. And that is apparently the biggest source of pollution now. Freshwater fish are 278 times more polluted than ocean fish. So if you have to choose, you would choose the ocean caught fish. But, but if you're a million times over, to reduce that by 278 times is nice, but that still means even the ocean fish are over the safe limit. And this is the result of sort of our regulatory scheme here in the U.S., which is first do harm, then we'll regulate you. And so this disaster, there's like $8 billion for cleaning up PFAS in the Inflation Reduction Act, but nobody is exactly sure how to do that. And, we're not sure what $8 billion is going to do to this. Now the levels are reducing. There is some good news because chemical manufacturers have pretty much abandoned PFAS in the recent years, although there's still a few applications for it still being used. But bad news, basically bad news. And some more bad news, I've got to pile that on this week. Harvard School of Public Health on December 14th did a story, and the title, here we go, long titles again. Pollination loss removes healthy foods from global diets, increases chronic diseases, causing excess deaths. So basically what this story says is bee deaths equal human deaths, because what has happened is there's been a decline in insects, and specifically in bees and butterflies and the insects that pollinate things. And so that has led to a decline worldwide in fruit production, fruit, vegetable, and nut production, the healthy foods, because they need those pollinators. And so if you don't have them, you got to pollinate by hand, or you get reduced levels of pollination because there's less birds and bees and butterflies. And so less fruit and vegetables and nuts equals more deaths, because people are eating less healthy foods because they can't get the healthy foods. And the level of death, they're estimating it's almost 500,000 people a year are dying because they don't have enough of the healthy foods in their diet, because there's not enough of that healthy food to go around anymore. They say that this death level is equivalent roughly to what people dying of prostate cancer or substance abuse. There's been a 1 to 2% annual decline in insects over the past several years. So the problem is getting worse, not better. And for those of you who don't really care that bee deaths equal human deaths, pollinator deaths equals people dying, this also causes a 10 to 30% loss in income for farmers, because they're trying to grow these fruits, vegetables, and nuts, but the pollination rate has gotten so low, they don't have enough product to sell, and so there's less profit here. Not just less people, less profit. So, when we say at the start of every show that it affects your wealth, your health, your happiness, here's definitely a health and wealth connection. So, solution, we have to stop using so many pesticides and herbicides, because that's what's killing the pollinators, and the pollinators are what we need to survive. Next story, and this is, again, the regular listeners will know, this is the story that never dies. This is a House Bill 6 update. The trial of Larry Householder, the former Speaker of the House, who was at the center of this whole incredible $60 million plus bribery scheme. His trial starts tomorrow. And on the 17th, this past week, the Columbus Metropolitan Club had a very interesting panel, and it had on it 3 people. One, a fellow named Ashley Brown, who used to be on the Public Utilities Commission. David DeVillers, who was the U.S. District Attorney who arrested Larry Householder and brought him into court and charged him. And a reporter named Kathy Ann Kowalski. And the theme of the panel, and it's available on the Cleveland Metropolitan Club's YouTube channel, so if you're interested, you should go watch it, was basically dark money and how it's wrecking our society and our environment. And this, unfortunately, this video has only had like 118 views so far, and it should have thousands, because they went into some detail about why this guy was charged and how the people all around him, the company, First Energy, and several of his cohorts have already confessed, yes, there was bribery, and we took bribes, or we gave bribes. Larry Householder is maintaining his innocence. And the thing is, one of my favorite parts in this, well, there are two parts I wanted to mention. One, the PUCO guy, Ashley Brown, when he gave his remarks, he talked about how on his first day as a PUCO person, as being on the Public Utilities Commission, a lobbyist from a company, a generating company, came up to him and said, hey, you want to go to dinner? And then he was like, well, I'm not sure that would be appropriate. And then the lobbyist was like, well, I was told that all we have to do to get what we want is pretty much take you guys out to dinner. And the DeVillers, the attorney, the former prosecutor, was like, did you go to the FBI and tell him this? And the guy was like, oh, no, I didn't. Maybe I should have. But it just points out just how broken the system that's supposed to regulate the utilities, how broken it is, how much the utilities think they can just control it. And David DeVillers, he's now a private attorney with a company called Barnes and Thornburg. When he was the district attorney who brought this case, and unfortunately he got fired by Biden when Biden took office. He was a Trump appointee, which made it all the more intense that he would go ahead and charge arguably one of the most powerful Republicans in the state of Ohio with this crime. And so it means that we have to start reacting to this stuff, because what the politicians are learning as scandals like this happen is that there is no consequence for it. One thing, the reporter, Kathy Ann Kowalski, who was on the panel, talked about how difficult it was to actually tease out who is giving any of this money, any of this dark money, that legally speaking, these dark money groups aren't required to tell who's giving the donations. It could be anybody. It could be the mafia. It could be China. It could be anybody. Could be dumping money into these dark groups who then are allowed to donate it to politicians. And we saw an example of that. We just managed to find out with the passage of the law that legalized gambling in Ohio, that the governor took $1 million from a pro-gambling organization for his campaign, and then a month later made it legal to gamble in Ohio. The problem is that these folks were all focused on the idea that if we report it, if we could find out who these dark money people are, if we could tell everybody what's going on and show them the corruption, then there'll be consequences for these politicians. And unfortunately, it seems like in Ohio anyway, we're in a situation where people don't care about the corruption. And yet the corruption is what's leading to bad policies. And one of my favorite points in this presentation was somebody pointed out that DeWine is still saying to this day, he claims that this is excellent policy, even though there were bribes and everything. That he would have supported it anyway. But that argument just got completely demolished by all the panelists who pointed out, no, this policy means you personally, the people listening right now, are paying more for dirtier electricity. In other words, it's literally the worst possible policy. It's more expensive, it's dirtier, it's less reliable, and all the horrible things that House Bill 6 did, and House Bill 6 is still on the books, even though they took out part of it. They took out the direct subsidies to the nukes. They still eliminated support for conservation. They're still directly supporting old coal plants. That is literally the worst possible energy policy. And so, once again, it's a case of basically you're being lied to your face. And it just struck me that the Columbus Metropolitan Club, it's kind of like civil society is now trying to cope with this criminal conspiracy society, which is sort of in the background literally stealing from all of us, because every time you pay your electric bill, you are getting dinged for this corruption. And so we need to start caring. Even though people in the last election overwhelmingly re-elected DeWine, we need to start caring and start making a difference. Or we know from looking at other countries, there's literally no bottom. They will just keep piling on the corruption. Your electric bill will double and triple and quadruple. You will get poorer and poorer because corruption benefits, by definition, it benefits a very, very few people at the top, and it hurts everybody else. So we'll keep an eye on this trial and see what happens to Larry Householder. Hopefully, there'll be some repercussions for him for this creating this situation. Okay, next story. And again, this is a direct effect of ecological stuff on your pocketbook, and that is the bird flu is causing an egg shortage, which is causing egg prices to skyrocket. A dozen eggs now can cost anywhere from $4 to $8. And the reason is the avian bird flu, which we've been reporting on all year. In fact, we did a whole show about what they did up in Michigan when they slaughtered 800 cormorants because they were afraid they'd be carrying bird flu around. So we've been following the bird flu crisis for well over a year, but now the mainstream media is starting to notice it because this last year, 58 million chickens, turkeys, and ducks were killed at farms because of bird flu. Because the way they respond is once bird flu shows up, they kill all the poultry that are exposed to it to keep it from spreading. And so that's why your eggs are costing more. The CDC actually has a website that I found that keeps account. So you can, it's kind of morbid, but you can go there and see, exactly how many birds have been euthanized because of bird flu. And bird flu has showed up in all 50 states in wild birds, and in 47 out of 50 birds on poultry farms have been euthanized. And so, it's not over, and it's getting worse. And once again, this is another thing that's worsened by climate change, because if you're a wild bird and you're going through these crazy temperature fluctuations, 60 degrees one day, 20 degrees the next, rain and thunderstorms followed by snowstorms, that lowers your resistance to things like bird flu, and you're more likely, if you're a bird, to transmit it into some of the farmed poultry and chicken. And of course, we know that the way we farm poultry is just super unnatural, cramming them into tiny little buildings with millions of birds. And so it's a combination of environmental factors that have killed all the chicken, 58 million chickens, turkeys, and ducks so far. We also know that bird flu does transmit to other animals. There was a story, a family of grizzly bears in Yellowstone died from bird flu this past month. Their bird flu has also affected seals, foxes, and humans. A few humans have caught the bird flu now. So this is a big story, and one we got to keep watching. All right, running out of time here, but there's one more story I wanted to get to, and then one more thing I wanted to talk about. I got 7 minutes, according to Josh. So, over in Japan, there were a bunch of executives who were on trial for the Fukushima disaster because what happened is there was the Fukushima disaster. What happened is the nuclear plants got hit by a tsunami, and that tsunami took out their water pumps, and so with no water pumping around, the plants overheated and melted down, and they're still melting down technically, because they still, if they ever stop pouring water over the molten cores that are deep in the ground underneath the plants, those cores will just heat up again and start reacting again. But what happened is there was a lawsuit brought in the Tokyo High Court against several of the executives at the time, the chairman of TEPCO, the company that owns the nuclear power plants, and a couple other vice presidents. And the Tokyo High Court said they were not guilty. They said that these guys could not have predicted that a tsunami would happen high enough to breach their seawall. The problem is the defense supplied documentation that in 2008, 3 years before the disaster, TEPCO itself generated a report saying that there could be 15-meter tsunamis that would hit the plant. And they had a 10-meter seawall, which, was short by about a third, which is why the plants got hit by the wave and melted down. And so they were literally handed a report saying it's very likely that that we could have a 15-foot tsunami, and yet the court somehow says that they could not have predicted that. The government has also said, I'm sorry, it's not our fault, even though it was a 2002 report by the government that generated this 2008 report. And the lawyers for this, and basically everybody who watched this trial in Japan, were just flabbergasted because, they showed, the guys were told, these men were directly told, this tsunami of this size can happen at our plant, and they decided to ignore it. But then somehow it's not their fault that it actually happened. Somehow they could not have predicted what they were told was going to happen. And it's important to note that it took 12 years for this to get to this point. The disaster was 12 years ago, and they say justice delayed is justice denied, and I would say that that's very true. Now, it is true that in Tokyo District Court, some of the executives were found civilly liable, and they have been given a $103 billion damage claim against them that they have to pay somehow. But I think that this is just indicative that, it's again, the whole thing is denying the truth. This court in Tokyo is denying the truth that everyone can plainly see. And so they may appeal. They may appeal to the Japanese High Court, but we have to wait and see. But right now, justice has not been done. All right, and that brings me to the last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. And this is going back to the idea of doing something. Every year, the regular listeners know that the anniversary of the Fukushima nuclear disaster is March 11th. And every year we promote something called Unplugged Nuclear Power. And I just want to invite all the listeners to participate in it this year. And what it is we're going to boycott grid power for the 24 hours of March 11th in order to remember the Fukushima disaster and all the victims of it, past, present, and future, and as a protest against nuclear power. And to show that we really don't need nuclear power, because last year nukes provided less than 10% of the world's electricity. And so with just a little bit of conservation, we could actually shut down all the nuke plants and not have to worry about them. So that's 10% is very easy. That would be what we'd call level 1. There's 4 levels of participation. Level 1 is just consciously go around and turn out some lights and use less electronics. Level 2 is severe conservation. Basically turn off everything in your household for those 24 hours except like your sump pump and your furnace and your refrigerators, which is nice, sit around with the family and play board games instead of using your electronics for a change. Level 3 is disconnect from the grid. And for that, you need some backup power. Like we recommend battery-powered backup as opposed to like natural gas or diesel, because those are a little more difficult and they generate carbon monoxide and stuff. But if you disconnect from the grid, that's level 3. And then level 4 is put more power onto the grid using wind and solar than you take off the grid that day. So whatever level you can participate in, we invite you to participate in. Remember, that's March 11th, which is a Saturday this year. So should be something. Well, that's about it. Gosh, we reached the end of the hour. It was tougher to do it without Rebecca, but we managed to get through it. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. This is Joe DeMare, and I am signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't